Science cannot operate without this notion of the restoration of initial conditions. And yet this is a highly unexamined notion. And as all these anecdotal incidents indicate, there is no restoration of initial conditions. All of science is being practiced on an unexamined and apparently false assumption. So a more honest definition of what science is science is the art of studying those phenomena so crude that they can have an apparent restoration of initial conditions. But that leaves out all investment schemes, love affairs, dynastic families, military campaigns, and what have you. None of those can have their initial conditions restored, and those are the things that are really important to us. So it then is correctly seen to be a very limited way of doing intellectual business, having a very narrow spectrum of applications. One way I think of thinking about the difference between ordinary science and what Rupert is trying to do is to think of science as that enterprise of human thought which attempts to state what is possible. What is possible. But out of the very large class of the possible, certain things are going to have to be selected to actually happen, to undergo what Whitehead calls the formality of actually occurring. And an idea like Rupert's is a way of saying, well, here it's the past. The past is the factor which selects against the class of the possible to narrow it into this much narrower class, the class of those things which have actually occurred. Science never talks about how the class of the possible is narrowed into the class of the actually occurring. And yet this is obviously a big question. We don't want to know what's possible. We want to know what's going to happen. We don't want to know what might have happened. We want to know what happened. And so new ways of thinking about causality, new ways of thinking about time, new ways of thinking about the way influence, the influence of form is mitigated into the world of three-dimensional space. Does it come from the past? Does it come from some kind of Platonic never-never land that is a hyperdimension that surrounds apparent space and time? Does it come from the future? Is it like a dynamic attractor? Is it a huge flickering shadow across a lower dimensional landscape that is somehow gathered into itself? These are the kinds of questions that have to be asked to create a new model of time that is empowering of the felt presence of immediate experience. That is the new ground zero of any kind of humane science. The felt presence of the immediate experience of the individual has to be the primary datum of a new science. Otherwise, it isn't going to be a new science. It's just going to be a retread on the old science. I think one way to think about information coming from the future is to imagine that ordinarily this is not allowed, but to make a quantum mechanical metaphor, you can imagine bits of information that tunnel into the past in the way that particles overcome energy transitions by magically appearing on the other side of them without ever having gone over them. And it's possible to imagine that a very small amount of information actually leaks into the past, and that this information becomes the province of seers and shamans and visionary thinkers of all sorts, that creativity is this appetition. You know, there's a word in Gaelic, haraeth, which means simultaneously nostalgia for the past and the future. And it seems to me that kind of nostalgia for the past and the future is what drives great creative spirits, poets, and visionaries. And it has this enchanted, this fey kind of aura about it, because information from the future is necessarily magical. It exists and yet it cannot exist, because in its existence is implicitly is a paradox. That art's task is to save the soul of mankind, and that anything less is a dithering while Rome burns. If the artist cannot find the way, then the way cannot be found.